I didn't start eating cheese and drinking wine to live longer. I started because one day I dropped my TV remote on the floor, and I wasn't sure I could stand back up. It sounds small. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't fall. Nothing broke. But I sat there looking at that remote like it was 10 pounds heavier than it should have been, doing the math in my head. If I lean forward, can I get back up without using both hands? At 94, you learn to pay attention to moments like that. Now, if you saw me today, you wouldn't think much of it. I live alone in a small house in Toledo, Ohio. I cook my own meals. I walk out to the mailbox most days. I still make it to church when the weather behaves. Nothing impressive, just normal. But it didn't always feel normal. 16 years ago, when I was 78, my husband passed. And like a lot of people do, I decided it was time to get serious about my health. I cut out cheese, stopped drinking wine, switched to low-fat everything, bought the kind of groceries that look responsible but don't taste like much. I thought I was doing everything right. Dinner became quick. Sometimes a frozen meal from Kroger. Sometimes a sandwich eaten standing at the kitchen counter. Most nights I'd sit in front of the TV and eat without really noticing what I was eating. Nothing bad happened right away. That's the tricky part. But over the next few years, things started to shift. Not in a way you can point to, just little changes. I got up from chairs a little slower. By mid-afternoon, I felt tired for no clear reason. I started skipping things. A Sunday here, a short walk there. I told myself it was normal. That's what people say when they don't have a better explanation. The house got quieter. Meals got faster. Days got smaller. And I kept telling myself I was being healthy. That afternoon with the remote wasn't a crisis. It was just the first time I stopped pretending I didn't notice what was happening. And the strange part was, nothing about it felt urgent. I didn't wake up one morning and think something's wrong. There was no doctor visit, no diagnosis, no big moment where everything changed. It just slid. I started noticing it in small ways. I'd stand up from the couch and pause for a second before walking, like my body needed a quick meeting to decide what to do next. By 3 p.m, I felt done with the day, even if I hadn't really done anything. I told myself that's just aging. Everybody says that. It's a very convenient explanation. My meals got simpler, but not in a good way. I wasn't cooking much anymore. I'd grab something from the freezer at Kroger, heat it up, eat it in front of the TV, and call it dinner. No table, no plate sometimes, just a fork and whatever tray it came in. And I ate fast. Not because I was busy, just because there was nothing about it that made me want to slow down. I wasn't drinking wine anymore. That felt like a responsible decision. I cut cheese out completely. Also responsible. Everything I did checked the right boxes. But my days started feeling thinner. I stopped walking to the end of the driveway as often. Some days I'd let the mail sit there until the next morning. It didn't seem like a big deal. just one less trip outside. Then I missed a Sunday at church, then another. I had reasons: weather, feeling tired, not sleeping well. All of them sounded reasonable. The truth was, I just didn't feel like moving. And because I live alone, there wasn't anyone there to notice. No one to say, "Hey, you've changed." When you're by yourself, things can shift for a long time before you realize how far they've gone. I kept thinking I was doing everything right, eating clean, avoiding bad foods, taking it easy. But my world was getting smaller, one quiet decision at a time. And I didn't question it until that moment with the remote made it impossible to ignore. I picked it up anyway eventually, but I didn't forget how that felt. Not the effort, the hesitation, and the next few days that feeling stayed with me. Not loud, not dramatic. Just sitting there in the background like something I couldn't quite ignore anymore. There wasn't a big decision after that, no plan, no list. I didn't suddenly become one of those people who wake up at 5 in the morning and fix their entire life before breakfast. What happened was much smaller. One afternoon, I drove over to a little farmer's market not far from my house. I hadn't been there in years. I used to go with my husband, back when we actually planned meals instead of just getting through them. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just walking around, mostly out of habit, maybe a little curiosity. And then I saw the cheese. Nothing fancy, just a simple block sitting in a cooler. But it caught my attention because I realized I hadn't bought cheese in a long time. Years, probably. I stood there longer than I needed to. Not because I didn't know what it was. Because I had convinced myself I wasn't supposed to eat it anymore. Then I thought, well, who exactly is stopping me? So I bought a small piece. That night I did something I hadn't done in a while. I made a real dinner. Nothing complicated, just something warm on a plate at the table instead of in front of the TV. I cut a small slice of that cheese and put it on the side. And then, almost without thinking about it, I poured a small glass of wine. I hadn't had wine in years either. It felt a little strange at first, like I was breaking a rule I couldn't quite remember agreeing to. I sat down and ate slowly, not on purpose. It just happened that way. Nothing changed the next morning. I didn't wake up stronger. My legs didn't suddenly feel better. I wasn't walking around like a new person. Some days after that, I went right back to old habits. Grabbed something quick, ate standing up, skipped cooking altogether, but something had shifted even if it was small. For the first time in a long time, dinner didn't feel like something I had to get through. It felt like something I could actually sit down and be part of. I found myself doing it again the next night without making a decision about it. Not a big meal. Nothing fancy, just something warm on a plate, a small piece of cheese on the side, and a glass of wine poured almost out of habit. I didn't call it a routine. I didn't track it. There was no plan, but it started to repeat. Some nights I skipped it. Some nights I went back to eating whatever was easy. I'm not going to pretend I turned into a different person overnight. I didn't. But more evenings than not, I sat down at the table again. And something about that slowed the rest of the day down. When you sit at a table, you don't rush the same way. You notice what you're eating. You take a few extra minutes. It doesn't sound like much, but when your days have been moving too fast, in the wrong direction, those few minutes matter. After dinner, I started doing one more small thing. I'd walk out to the mailbox. Not a workout, not a fitness routine, just a short walk down the driveway and back. Some days I didn't feel like it, but it was close enough that I didn't have a good excuse. At first I noticed every step. My legs felt stiff. I was careful, maybe more careful than I needed to be. But after a while I stopped thinking about it so much. I'd stand on the porch for a minute, sometimes longer. Sometimes a neighbor would wave and we'd talk about nothing important. Weather mostly, mail sometimes. The kind of conversations that don't go anywhere but still count. That part mattered more than I expected, because for a long time my days had been quiet in a way that wasn't helping me. This wasn't a big change. My house didn't get bigger. My life didn't suddenly become busy, but it stopped shrinking. I wasn't skipping as many things anymore. I started going back to church more regularly. Not every week, but enough that people noticed I was there again. And the strange thing is, none of this felt like effort. It just felt like I had found a pace that my body could actually keep up with. I still do the same thing most evenings without thinking much about it. I make something simple, put it on a plate, cut a small piece of cheese, and pour a glass of wine. I sit down at the table, not in front of the TV, and I take my time. Not because I'm trying to be disciplined, just because that's what feels normal now. And I'll tell you the truth, it's not the cheese, it's not the wine. If you took both of those away tomorrow, I'd still be okay. What changed my life wasn't what I was eating, it was how I was living while I was eating. I stopped rushing through my days like I had somewhere else to be. I stopped treating meals like a task to finish. I stopped spending every evening alone without even noticing it. I gave my day a little structure again, just enough to hold on to. If there's anything I've learned at 94, it's this: your life doesn't usually fall apart all at once. It gets smaller quietly, one skipped step at a time. And the way back isn't dramatic either. It's small, repeatable things that you don't argue with. So here's my advice if you want something practical. Don't just eat to get it over with. Sit down, even if it's just you. Don't remove everything you enjoy and call that healthy. And don't wait until something feels wrong before you pay attention to your routine. You don't need a perfect system. You need something simple enough that you'll actually keep doing it. Because in the end, it's not about living to 100. It's about not making each year harder than the last. And if stories like this mean something to you, this channel is full of stories about life advice, stories about advice from grandparents, and stories about life lessons that come from real people living real lives. You can subscribe if you want to hear more of them.